I received a message from my wife's best friend. A dry, direct and almost impersonal message, as if she had rehearsed that phrase 1,000 times before pressing send. Your wife is going to the party with her lover. Be quick. My hand was shaking. I reread the message 3 times, trying to convince my brain that it was just a mistake, a joke in extremely bad taste. But the final comma felt like a sentence. There was no doubt, no room for interpretation. She was going. With he. For a party. While I, like an idiot, prepared a surprise dinner at home with candles, wine and a handwritten letter saying that she was the woman of my life. In that instant, everything fell apart. The sound around me disappeared, and my chest felt too small to contain my heart as it exploded in pain. I grabbed my car keys, drove like life was in slow motion and the world around me was watching me fall apart in silence. I arrived at the party like a stranger invading his own home. Nobody waited for me. And that made everything even more cruel. The room was full of fake smiles, empty conversations, and among them, her. Laughing. Dancing. In another man's arms. Silence fell when my eyes met hers. It was as if time froze, as if everyone there understood that something much bigger than a betrayal had just happened. She put down the glass of champagne, took a step forward and mouthed my name in a trembling voice. I can explain, she said, but her voice was just a distant echo amid the roar that filled my head. I didn't say anything. I just looked at her like someone looking into an abyss from which they can never return. And then, the unexpected happened. The party guests began to whisper. Some lowered their eyes. Others looked away in embarrassment. That's when I realized, many people there already knew. They had already seen it. They had already heard. I was the only one in the dark. The only one who still believed he was married to someone faithful. The only one who loved alone. Her best friend, the same one who sent me the message, was there. Sitting in a corner, with her face tense and her hands shaking, as if carrying the weight of silent guilt on her back. She had warned me because she couldn't bear to see the farce continue, because she had also been betrayed, not only by my wife, but by her friend who shared secrets, confessions and perhaps, even other men. And then the night fell. The mask fell brutally. The justifications began to rain down, like hail on a dry field. It was just once, you were distant, it's not what it seems, he made me feel alive again, you've changed. Each sentence was a stab in the middle of the chest, each argument an insult to the story I believed I had built with her for years. I wondered how we got to that point. How could someone who claimed to love me smile alongside someone else, while I was reduced to a spectator of my own misfortune? The looks turned to me not with pity, but with that mix of shame and cheap compassion. And I understood at that moment, what destroys is not the betrayal itself, but the contempt for the bond that was broken. The way she saw me now, was no longer that of a man. It was that of an obstacle overcome. But I didn't fall. Not there. I just left silently. No shouting. No crying. Without punching anyone. Because I knew what came next would be even more devastating. What she and that man didn't know, was that I was already noticing the signs. Small, almost invisible, but they started to scream over time. The deleted messages, the different perfume on the clothes, the laugh that was no longer mine. The way she put on makeup to go out and said it was just a meeting between friends. The coldness in the touch, the absence in the look. And at that moment, standing in the middle of that party, I only confirmed what I already knew. But nothing prepared me for what I discovered later. Because what she did wasn't just marital betrayal. It was a theater. A subtle and cruel conspiracy involving more people than I could imagine. Close friends who knew and never said. Relatives who pretended to believe her lies. A whole circle of conveniences that preferred to keep me blind rather than see the truth exposed. I was the last to know everything. But that night, I stopped being a spectator. I decided to react. Not with violence. But with something she would never expect. I had a plan. And what began as a tragic discovery would turn into a turning point that would forever change our lives. Because I would expose every detail. I would reveal, one by one, all the secrets she hid behind that sweet face. And she would do it the same way she destroyed everything, publicly. Coldly. With calculation. With elegance. She hurt me where it hurt most. In pride. In love. In the time that I will never get back. But she didn't imagine that the price for each of my tears would be charged with interest. And her lover, that man who thought he had won what was mine, would soon discover that he had entered into a game much bigger than he could handle. And when everything is revealed, when the masks are ripped off once and for all, when the doors close and there is no more party, laughter or justification, she will understand that the greatest loss she had, was not that of her marriage, nor her status, nor the friends who judged her in silence, but rather, the chance to have been a woman worthy of the trust of someone who would have done everything for her. And the most curious thing of all, is that even before she confessed to cheating, I already knew. Before I even received the message from my friend, I already had proof. Because that party, where everything fell apart, was actually a trap. And all the guests, were there for me. Now, imagine what happens when the traitor believes he is the one pulling the strings, but in reality, he is about to be unmasked in front of everyone. Even from her lover. Even from accomplices. What no one there expected, was what I did after I left that party. And this you will want to hear until the end. Welcome to the channel. Here, we do not support any type of betrayal, on the contrary, our stories are a cruel and realistic reflection of how betrayal can destroy lives, families and dreams. All narratives are fictitious, created to awaken reflection, emotion and show that every choice has consequences. Get ready, because what you're going to hear now is a shocking story, intense and unforgettable. Leonard and Emily were the kind of couple who, in the eyes of others, seemed unshakable. Married for almost 8 years, they built a comfortable, solid life together, without excess, but full of small rituals that, in a way, supported the illusion of continuous happiness. They lived in a large, well-decorated apartment, overlooking the park where, on Sundays, they would have coffee together, laughing about silly things and remembering their college days, where they met. Leonard was an architect, meticulous, organized, someone who believed that detail was what separated the mediocre from the memorable. Emily, on the other hand, was PR, spontaneous, warm, loved by her friends for the way she made any room feel welcoming. Together, they seemed to balance rigor and lightness, calculation and intuition, discipline and improvisation. They met at a student conference on sustainable urbanism, when they were still students, and have never been apart since. The romance started quickly, intensely, as if the two knew they belonged together before they even learned to live together. Emily used to say that Leonard was her point of peace, and he, always a little more restrained in his words, looked back at her as if he no longer knew how to imagine life without that sideways smile that she used whenever she wanted something. Over the years, they've weathered the natural turmoil of any couple, job changes, family losses, the miscarriage she suffered in their 3rd year of marriage, but they weathered it all with the kind of quiet strength that made even their most cynical friends believe in love. Leonard valued routines. He woke up early, prepared coffee, read the newspapers and organized his day almost like a sacred ritual. Emily, on the other hand, fluctuated between appointments, phone calls, messages and meetings, living at a completely opposite pace, but always returning home as if that shared space was her true refuge. Despite their different schedules, they had dinner together every night. It was an unwritten rule, but one that was faithfully respected. At these times, they talked about what they experienced that day, about her projects with demanding clients, or Leonard's new contracts, who had recently been invited to renovate a cultural center in the city. When they didn't speak, they just ate in silence, a comfortable silence, the kind that only exists between two people who really know each other. In the eyes of their friends, they were the ideal couple. They often received guests at home, with well-organized dinners, carefully set tables, good music and quality wine. Emily was the perfect host, remembering everyone's names, making everyone feel special. Leonard preferred to observe from afar, without many big smiles, but always available for a deeper conversation, a more critical analysis. Even at parties, the couple never left each other completely. They locked eyes all the time, as if they had an invisible thread between them, as if they had a pact that no one else understood. Despite the apparent harmony, there were spaces between them that were never completely filled. Leonard, always rational, had difficulty dealing with Emily's unpredictability, her constant thirst for new things, her almost inconsequential way of saying what she thought. Sometimes he would remain silent for hours after a conversation, trying to find a logical way to deal with what he felt, but he could never express it clearly. Emily, in turn, felt a lack of enthusiasm in his eyes, a certain madness, an off-script impulse. As much as she loved him, at times she felt like she was next to a man who no longer saw her as a woman, but as an extension of his own well-planned life. Deep down, she wanted to be surprised. She wanted to be desired urgently, not just with affection. In recent months, this silent distance seemed to increase, even though no one around noticed. Leonard worked increasingly late, immersed in projects that required concentration, tight deadlines and long meetings. Emily, on the other hand, got involved in new events and began traveling frequently, always with plausible justifications. Their routine remained intact, but there was a hidden tension in their gestures, a rush to finish conversations, a shorter hug at the end of the day. Sometimes, during dinner, she would talk about a new client with a twinkle in her eye, and Leonard would just nod, showing no real interest. Other times, he would mention his trips to visit construction sites, and she would respond with an automatic smile, without asking anything else. There was still love, but it seemed shrouded in a haze of weariness. Emily began spending more time with a childhood friend, Helena, who had always been a constant figure in her life. Helena was fun, impulsive and spoke without filters, the type of person who made any moment lighter. Leonard liked her, but was suspicious of the way she influenced Emily. Sometimes, the wife would return from meetings with her friend with strange ideas, phrases like, "Have you ever thought about experiencing something completely new?" or, "Do you think you are really happy or just comfortable?" These questions seemed innocent, but they bothered Leonard deeply, as if they planted doubts in a land he considered fertile and safe. He never expressed it, of course. He just kept it, like he always did. Helena also frequented their house, and little by little she became a constant presence. He participated in dinners, in conversations about the future, and laughed out loud at Emily's jokes, while Leonard watched in silence. One day, she suggested organizing a charity gala together, something big, elegant, with influential people from the city. Emily loved the idea. He threw himself headlong into the organization, and Leonard, although with some skepticism, supported him. It was an opportunity to showcase her work, network and bring visibility to her career. The party was scheduled for 2 months from now, and during that time, Emily immersed herself completely in the preparations. Meanwhile, Leonard was experiencing a turning point in his career. He had received a proposal to open an office branch in another city, a challenge that required more time, travel, and delicate decision-making. I wanted to talk to Emily about it, but she was always busy with the party, with meetings, with urgent phone calls. He began to feel alone in his own house. He didn't complain, he didn't make a fuss, he just moved away a little more each day. At that time, not even daily dinners happened with the same frequency. Sometimes he ate alone, other times she said she wasn't hungry. The connection that once seemed unbreakable now felt like a taut thread about to snap. But there was a part of Leonard that still insisted. Who still believed that this was just a phase. He remembered the trips they took, the moments when she cried laughing at something silly he said, the way she slept facing him, with her hand on his chest. It wasn't possible for all that to be over. So he started planning a surprise. Something simple but meaningful. A special dinner, maybe a weekend away. He even thought about taking her to the place where they met. I wanted to rekindle what they had. I just needed an opening. From a moment when she was truly present. And that moment seemed like it would come with the party. Emily was radiant with the preparations, talking about the dress she would choose, the decorations, the guest list. Helena, as always, was by her side in every decision. Leonard watched the two from a certain distance, but still with an open heart. Deep down, I believed that night, that celebration, could be the starting point for them. I was tired of feeling like they were moving in opposite directions. He wanted to bring his wife back, he wanted her to look at him with the same desire as before. He wanted to feel chosen again. And in that whirlwind of expectations, plans and silences, the night of the party finally approached. Leonard bought a new suit, prepared a surprise speech to honor Emily, and discreetly left tickets in an envelope for a short trip, just the two of them, to the place where they first fell in love. It was his last attempt to rescue what he still believed existed between them. Little did he know that night would not only reveal smiles and toasts. That behind the formal dresses and crystal glasses, secrets were ready to explode. Little did he know that as he waited for a fresh start, their story was about to change forever. And it would all start with a look. A single look that would cut through the crowd and show, without words, that what seemed like love, maybe it was just appearance. The party approached with the cruel speed of something inevitable. Leonard watched everything being assembled before his eyes like someone watching a castle being built on the edge of a cliff. Every detail was meticulously taken care of by Emily, who seemed to live in a state of permanent excitement, as if this were more than a professional event, but rather a chance for reinvention. She spoke with a twinkle in her eye about the sponsors, about the increasingly select guest list, about the suppliers who got exactly what she wanted even at short notice. Leonard was smiling, but inside he felt a kind of disarray. It wasn't jealousy, nor insecurity, it was something quieter, like the feeling that her presence had become dispensable in that universe that she had created with so much enthusiasm. Helena also appeared more and more, sometimes to discuss the latest decoration adjustments, sometimes to give her opinion on the sound, the drinks, the flowers, but there was something in her look that worried him. An invasive glow, a kind of exaggerated security in how he moved around the house, as if he knew things he didn't. Leonard watched her in silence, trying to understand the discomfort she caused him, but, as usual, he swallowed his doubt and kept his focus on Emily, because he still believed that, somehow, she just needed space, stimulation, time. Little by little, he was left out of the decisions. Emily no longer consulted his opinion, she just informed him. The dress is chosen, Helena managed to close the deal with the photographer, the lighting will be in amber tones, it will look beautiful, you will see. Leonard tried to remain present, to appear interested, but it was like knocking on the door of a room where he was no longer welcome. She was at another rhythm, at another frequency. And yet, he continued. For her. For the memory of what they built. On a Saturday afternoon, while Emily went out with Helena to pick up some last-minute items, Leonard took advantage of the solitude of the apartment to resume the surprise plan. He dug up old boxes, searched for photos, scribbled letters, thought of speeches. She wanted something that touched her. Something that would remind her why they were together. He imagined that, perhaps, the distance between them had been caused by himself, by routine, by involuntary absences, by the years that had erased the shine of newness. On the night of the party, he planned to take her to the terrace, overlooking the illuminated city, to hand over the envelope with the tickets. It was supposed to be a fresh start. And for the first time in weeks, Leonard felt something close to hope. The night before the event was filled with an almost feverish movement. Emily was gone for hours, saying she was resolving a problem with the sound and the buffet staff. Helena didn't respond to Leonard's messages, which he found strange, since she was usually quick. He slept alone, the bed still made on her side. In the morning, she came back with dark circles under her eyes and a coffee in her hand, saying she needed a shower urgently. He looked at her, trying to find in her the woman who made him smile, but she brushed past him with a hasty kiss on the cheek and went straight to the shower. On the day of the party, everything looked impeccable. The room was stunning, with soft lights, well-chosen ambient music, elegant floral arrangements. The waiters moved discreetly, the guests arrived little by little, all dressed as if they had come out of a magazine catalogue. Emily circled among them like a star. The dark blue dress highlighted her body and her posture exuded self-confidence. She was admired, praised, surrounded. Helena was at his side, of course, dressed in gold, with a cup in her hand and her gaze attentive to everything. Leonard, more discreet, greeted the guests, answered questions about work, and waited for the right moment to make his surprise. But then, in the crowd, something hit him. It wasn't a word, nor a gesture. It was a look. A look that Emily exchanged with a tall man, with a clean beard and a confident smile. It was quick, almost imperceptible, but Leonard knew that kind of look. A silent recognition, a trace of something more intimate that no friendship could justify. He watched for a while, trying to ignore it, until he saw the two talking in a corner, laughing quietly, exchanging subtle touches that seemed innocent to those who weren't paying attention. His heart sank. The pain didn't come as a blow, but as a constant, increasing pressure, as if the chest was shrinking with each new interaction between them. He looked at Emily and waited for her to notice his discomfort, to give him a sign, anything that would take him away from that feeling of being on the edge of everything. But she didn't look. She didn't notice. She didn't want to notice. Meanwhile, Helena approached with a wide smile and commented on how perfect everything was, how radiant Emily was. Leonard nodded, but something inside him was breaking. He could no longer pretend that everything was okay. The laughter now seemed louder, the touches more explicit, the looks more brazen. And then, as if in an automatic movement, he began to walk around the room, meeting curious glances, ignoring greetings, until he was close enough to hear. Emily laughed. The man said something in her ear. She responded by touching his arm. And in that moment, everything was confirmed. Leonard no longer needed proof. I didn't need confessions. It was all there, raw, before your eyes. She betrayed him. It wasn't just an act. It was a choice. An emotional displacement that excluded him without warning, a cut made with precision and coldness. Leonard felt the dizziness of humiliation. He felt the weight of every time he defended that love. Of all the times you believed. But he didn't react. Not at that moment. Not there. His gaze met Helena's, who was watching him from afar, without surprise, with an indecipherable expression. It was as if she knew. As if I already expected that. As if that night was more than a simple celebration. Leonard couldn't comprehend the extent of what was happening, but he felt there was something bigger behind it all. A game he hadn't been invited to play. Emily, upon noticing his presence, tried to smile, but her eyes revealed guilt. She tried to get closer, said something about talking later, but he didn't respond. He just looked at her with the depth of someone watching the end of a world that took years to build. And in that silence between the two, in the middle of the music and toasts, while the guests continued to pretend they didn't notice, Leonard made a decision. The party would not end as she had imagined. Not that time. And what would come after that night, would reveal that there was something even deeper, dirtier, more treacherous. Something he would never have expected. The music seemed to have faded in volume, although the speakers continued to pour soft chords throughout the room. Everything around seemed to move in slow motion. The laughter, the conversations, the toasts, the footsteps. Leonard observed everything as if he were isolated in a dome of silence. Emily was still exchanging quick words with that man, trying to hide it, but her posture was no longer the same. There was tension in her shoulders, a barely concealed discomfort in the way she avoided looking directly at her husband. But what Leonard felt most wasn't anger, it was a deep emptiness, a kind of pain that doesn't throb, just settles and eats away inside. He looked at her like someone watching a stranger wearing the face of someone they once loved. He decided to leave the room. He walked among the laughing guests, unaware that they were about to witness something that would completely change the narrative of that night. He climbed the stairs that led to the reserved terrace and let the cold wind calm him. He needed seconds to organize his thoughts. He needed silence to find the calm that had always guided him. He took out of his pocket the envelope with the tickets he had so carefully prepared. He looked at the paper for a few seconds and then slowly tore it off, sheet by sheet, as if tearing himself apart. He tossed the pieces over the grate, watching them disappear into the dark of night. Soon after, he returned to the hall. The hostess's speech would be in a few minutes. Emily had already taken to the improvised stage, smiling at the photographers, thanking her with that air of elegance that made her admired by everyone. The microphone chirped for a second before picking up his voice. She began by thanking those present, the support of friends, the generosity of sponsors, and then, finally, her husband, who according to her, was the basis of everything. Leonard listened to her from the back of the room, motionless, with an intact glass in his hand. When she called him to the stage, all eyes turned. He walked slowly, like someone stepping through a minefield. As he walked up the steps, Emily reached out her hand to him, but Leonard didn't take it. He took the microphone, took a deep breath, and instead of starting a common speech, he just said that before saying anything, I would like to share a short video. The lights dimmed and the screen that had been installed to present sponsors and party moments lit up. The first images seemed to confuse the guests, common scenes from the couple's everyday life, a compilation of moments that seemed taken from a romantic retrospective. Smiles, trips, hugs. Some even applauded. But soon the soft soundtrack was replaced by audio captured in a more intimate setting. Emily's voice could be heard clearly. She was talking to someone, laughing, saying that she was exhausted from keeping up appearances, that she just needed some more time, that Leonard didn't deserve to know yet, that everything would be easier if he just went away to that new office in another city. The laughter continued, and then images appeared discreetly recorded in the hall itself. Leonard had installed hidden cameras in the place when setting up the party, not out of initial distrust, but because something inside him warned him that that night carried a different weight. The images showed Emily touching the other man's arm intimately, smiles exchanged with a complicity that no coworker would share. The silence was absolute. Nobody knew where to look. Emily, petrified on stage, tried to maintain her posture, but her breathing was already visibly uneven. The man at the side of the stage tried to discreetly move away. But that wasn't what shocked the guests. The video wasn't finished yet. Then, images captured of a conversation between Helena and another woman appeared, moments before the party. The words were picked up clearly by microphones that Leonard had positioned without anyone noticing. Helena said that Emily needed to control the situation more firmly, that the charade was already going on too long, and that Leonard deserved to know the truth, or at least part of it. And then, with a tone of someone who has been holding on to something for a long time, he revealed, you can continue deceiving Leonard, but most people here already know, Emily. They just don't talk because they're afraid of you, your name, your influence. But they're not blind. You've been betraying him for months and everyone sees it. The only one who still defends you, is him. The room exploded in a mixture of surprise, embarrassment and discomfort. Guests looked at each other, others began to get up and walk away. Leonard turned off the video and spoke again. His voice was firm, without tremors, but with a latent pain in each syllable. He said that, as much as it hurt, he needed to show it not for revenge, but for dignity. That he had loved Emily with everything he had and that the least he deserved was the truth. She said that she had discovered the betrayal weeks before, but that she waited for the party so as not to destroy something she had built with so much effort, even if part of it was based on lies. Emily tried to interrupt, taking the microphone, but Leonard held her arm gently, without aggression, just firmly, and said she would have time to explain herself. Which now he needed to finish. And then, with his eyes fixed on her, he asked, do you know what destroyed me most, Emily? It wasn't the betrayal. It wasn't seeing you with someone else. It was knowing that so many people knew and watched me as if I were a clown. You left me alone, even that. And I loved you too much to deserve that. Emily didn't respond right away. Her face was pale, her eyes were teary, but still there was something in her posture that wasn't regret, it was defense. She took the microphone, took a deep breath, and said that it was never her intention to hurt him, that she felt suffocated, that she needed to find herself again, that time had changed how she felt. But these words fell like ashes in the air. They were empty. They were too weak for the storm that had been unleashed. Leonard walked off the stage without looking back. He didn't run, he didn't hesitate. He just left, while everyone around whispered, commented, judged. But what no one there knew yet, was that that scandal, however devastating it was not the end. It was just the beginning. Because among all the looks that met that night, one, in particular, said more than any words. A look that came from someone who had been there the whole time, who knew everything, and who had finally decided to reveal what no one had yet dared to say out loud. And what would come next, would change everything. The room seemed to have turned into emotional ruins shortly after Leonard left. The lights, the flowers, the crystal glasses, everything now sounded out of place, as if the beauty had been ripped from space. Emily stood there, standing in the middle of that stage that once gave her pride, now reduced to a public scene of dishonor. The guests dispersed in awkward silence, trying to avoid direct glances, like someone leaving a social funeral in a hurry. Helena, for the first time that night, did not smile. He walked towards Emily, holding her by the shoulders, trying to whisper something she didn't even hear. The sound of the surrounding voices had been replaced by an internal, suffocating hum. She came down from the stage with heavy, hurried steps, crossed the room, passed through the lobby, and out the back door, like a fugitive trying to escape her own shame. Leonard hadn't gone home. I wouldn't have been able to bear the silence of the walls where everything was built and now crumbled. He walked aimlessly until he found a little bar with an old facade. He sat in the most discreet corner, ordered a whiskey without ice and stared at his own reflection in the mirror behind the bottles. The face before him seemed older, more rigid. It was the face of someone who, for the first time, had no more doubts, just scars that were beginning to burn. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Emily got into a car driven by Helena, still unable to say a single word. The friend, instead of trying to console with ready-made phrases, just drove in silence. He knew that any words now would be useless. Hours passed. Emily was sitting on the sofa in her own house, still wearing her party dress, her feet bare, her makeup smeared. Her cell phone vibrated insistently with messages and calls that she refused to answer. Helena watched her from the corner of the room, not knowing whether to stay or go. Until, finally, Emily broke the silence. He asked if she already knew, if she was aware that Leonard was going to expose everything. Helena shook her head slowly and said that she knew he was suspicious, but she didn't imagine he would do that in front of everyone. "He loved you more than anyone I've ever seen," she said in a voice that seemed to contain anger and compassion at the same time. Emily sighed deeply, threw herself against the pillow and covered her face with her hands. Then she began to cry, not as someone who regrets the exposure, but as someone who finally understands the size of the abyss she has dug. Meanwhile, Leonard returned to the apartment. There was nothing more to say. He opened the door, crossed the dark room and went straight to the office. He sat down at the computer, opened a new folder and began organizing files. Photos, conversations, recordings. The night he first caught Emily acting suspicious was weeks ago. Since then, he began to observe in silence, as if someone were meticulously recording the steps of an emotional disappearance. He already knew about the case, he had already suffered in secret, but he needed something that explained not only the why, but how much she had lied. And it was then, while organizing the records, that an old notification caught his attention. An archived email, sent about 3 weeks ago. It wasn't Emily's. It was Helena's. Leonard clicked. The content was direct, almost cold. Helena said she was tired of seeing Emily pretend, that she didn't deserve the love she received, that soon everyone would know who she really was. And it ended with a sentence that chilled Leonard from the inside out. Do you still think she cheated with just one man? Are you ready to know the rest? He got up from the chair as if something was pulling him out of his own body. He walked to his room, opened the drawer where he kept documents and found the old cell phone he used before changing the number. It was unloaded, covered in dust, but inside there were messages exchanged with Helena, records of forgotten conversations. After charging the device and searching through the archived conversations, the truth began to reveal itself, not as an explosion, but as a slow, poisonous infiltration. Helena didn't just know about the betrayal, she was part of it. Emily had not cheated on Leonard with just one man, but on multiple occasions, and with people who were among her most intimate circles. The lover exposed at the party was just the most recent. But the cruelest thing was that Helena had been the link between Emily and these men. She presented, arranged meetings, covered tracks. Leonard leaned back against the wall as if the air had gone out of him. He thought about the night Helena comforted him after his first serious fight with Emily, the dinners where she was present, always supporting, always smiling. Now he understood the smile. It wasn't support. It was manipulation. It was control. He wondered why. Why would someone who claimed to be his wife's friend, why would someone who entered their home as part of the family, be capable of engineering something so dirty? And the answer came with the memory of an old conversation, which I had ignored at the time. Helena had once said that she couldn't bear to see unhappy people clinging to destroyed relationships for fear of loneliness. Sometimes, she said, you have to tear off the mask for the real face to show. Leonard never understood. Now he understood everything. At the same moment, Emily, still on the sofa, got up with difficulty. I wanted to sleep, I wanted to forget, but I knew that the only thing I could still do was face it. She called Leonard, but he didn't answer. He sent a short message, "Can we talk? Please." Leonard read it, didn't respond immediately. He just stared out the window for long minutes before typing, "Tomorrow. 9 o'clock. In the park." That's all he wrote. The next morning brought a strange cold, as if the day itself felt that something serious was about to happen. Leonard arrived first, sat on a bench near the lake, watching the ducks and the dry leaves that the wind blew around in circles. Emily arrived shortly after, with her eyes downcast, her face haggard, and sat down without saying a word. For long seconds, the silence between them was so intense that it seemed like shouting. Until Leonard spoke. He didn't ask why. He just asked her to tell the whole truth. And then, with her voice cracking and her eyes widening, Emily said. He said the case with the man at the party was not the first. That it all started months ago, with a need that she refused to admit. She said that Helena always encouraged her to live something new, that she said that Leonard held her back, that she deserved more. Leonard just listened. Property. Without interrupting. Without question. And then he asked, "And why did you let her manipulate you like that?" Emily took a moment to respond, but when she did, the answer came out like a knife, "Because she always made me feel powerful. Like I was finally in control of my life." Leonard shook his head slowly, a cynical smile at the corner of his mouth. And then he said, "You were being controlled, Emily. And you didn't even realize it. She wasn't your friend. She just wanted to destroy what you had, because she never had anything like it." Emily recoiled as if she had been slapped. He tried to deny it, but Leonard opened his cell phone and showed the messages. Read excerpts. Helena's words confessing that Emily was unreliable, that Leonard deserved better, that she just wanted to see the fall to reveal the true face of love. Emily covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide. She never knew. She never imagined that the betrayal was not just hers with Leonard, but also Helena's with her. It was all a game. And everyone had lost. Leonard stood up. He looked at her with the coldest eyes he had ever had. And before leaving, he said, "I didn't come here looking for excuses. I came to say goodbye to what was left of respect." He walked away without looking back. Emily stood there, alone on the bench, her shoulders hunched, her face buried in her hands, the world collapsing irreversibly. And at that exact moment, somewhere in the city, Helena was smiling at the mirror. The chaos she caused was the only kind of control that still made her feel alive. But what she didn't know, was that Leonard had kept more than messages. And her game was far from over. The hours that followed the last meeting in the park were slow, suffocating, as if time had become a prison without walls. Emily did not go straight home, nor did she return to work. He walked aimlessly, stopping in squares, entering cafes, and leaving without ordering anything, as if he was looking for an anchor point that no longer existed. The faces on the street seemed to watch her with invisible eyes, judging, condemning, seeing in her everything that she herself now refused to accept. For the first time, she truly felt alone, stripped of any power, without the makeup of prestige, vanity, influence. There was nothing left to hide. Everything was on display, wide open. Not just his infidelity, but the fragility he tried to disguise for years behind well-articulated phrases and a false sense of control. Returning to the apartment was a painful experience. The environment, once sophisticated and familiar, now seemed cold and hostile. Every corner carried an echo of what she had destroyed. Leonard's scent was still on some of the pillows. The mug he used remained in the same place, on the kitchen counter, like a cruel reminder of everyday life that would not return. Emily walked slowly, as if entering a sacred space that no longer belonged to her. He lay down on the couch and cried, not like someone seeking forgiveness, but like someone who finally understands that some losses are definitive. Across town, Leonard spent the day reorganizing his life with almost surgical precision. He disconnected from social media, contacted his lawyer to begin the final separation procedures, updated his work schedule and started looking for apartments to rent temporarily. I didn't want to live under the same roof anymore. With each practical action, he felt lighter. The pain was still there, but it was a pain that now moved with purpose. It was as if, by rebuilding what he could, he managed to minimize the rubble left behind by the emotional destruction he had suffered. At night, he received an unexpected call. The number wasn't saved, but he recognized the voice immediately. It was a woman named Sarah, the ex-girlfriend of one of the couple's former mutual friends. She said that she needed to talk to him, that what happened at the party had triggered a series of revelations in circles that Leonard had no idea existed. They agreed to meet in a discreet cafe. Upon arrival, she took no time in getting straight to the point. He said that Helena was not just a passive accomplice in Emily's extramarital relationships. She encouraged other women in her social circle to test their limits, promoted meetings, set up situations and observed from afar like someone watching a psychological experiment. It wasn't just envy. It was manipulation, power, control. Leonard listened to everything in silence, but inside, a new understanding emerged. Helena didn't just destroy his marriage. She had turned other people's pain into a form of sadistic pleasure. Days passed. Emily finally found the courage to visit her parents. I expected a lecture, dirty looks, maybe even the silence of disappointment. But what he found was something worse, sadness. Her father looked at her with a mixture of tenderness and hurt. The mother, although she tried to maintain her posture, could barely hide her dejection. They said few words, but made it clear that they felt for Leonard's pain too. The daughter they had raised so carefully was now at the center of a storm that was affecting not just their marriage, but their entire family. Emily realized she had lost more than one partner. She had also lost the trust of those who loved her from the beginning. Leonard, on the other hand, focused on rebuilding his peace. He started therapy sessions, resumed the morning run he had abandoned, accepted a new project outside the city that would give him the opportunity to start over in another setting. But there was something about him that still weighed heavily. Something that stopped him from moving on completely. Helena's messages continued in her mind, repeating like an unbearable echo. She knew too much. There was too much planning. He couldn't just disappear amid the chaos he caused. It was then that Leonard decided to confront her. He arranged a meeting in a public place, a small cafe where there would be no room for lies or acting out. Helena arrived on time, wearing the same soft smile as always, as if nothing had happened. He was direct, showing the messages he had rescued, the prints, the evidence of his manipulation. She remained calm for a while, denying it, saying that everything was misinterpreted, that she just wanted to help. But when he realized there was no more pretending, he relaxed his shoulders and spoke with a coldness that gave him goosebumps. He said he always thought their marriage was a sham. Who saw Emily as a suffocated woman trying to fit into a model idealized by Leonard. He said he wanted to free her, and that if to do so he had to push her into error, that would be it. Leonard looked at her expressionlessly, but inside revolt was burning. Helena continued, saying that she had no regrets, that Emily had finally seen the real world, and that perhaps he should also be grateful for being forced out of the illusion. He got up, just said that her real world was rotten, and left. But something about that conversation made him uneasy. Not because of her perversity, but because she feels entitled to destroy in the name of supposed liberation. That night, returning home, Leonard sat down at a clipboard and began to write. Not a letter, not an outburst, but a kind of personal manifesto. He wrote about betrayal, about emotional manipulation, about how people confuse freedom with destruction. He wrote about love as a choice, not as a prison, about loyalty as an attitude, not as an obligation. And he realized that he still believed in love. But no longer in the one who submits. In the love that imposes limits. That demands respect. Meanwhile, Emily was making the decision to leave the apartment. He knew there was no more room there. She called a distant cousin who offered her a temporary room. He only took the essentials. As she closed the door for the last time, she faced the empty hallway and understood that there was nothing left of her there. He arrived at the new place carrying a suitcase and an exhausted body. In the following days, he gradually returned to work, but avoided social contacts. The invitations disappeared. The looks changed. That confident, applauded, admired woman was now seen with suspicion. And she didn't complain. I knew I deserved it. However, Emily also sought help. She started therapy, wrote long letters to herself, faced the layers of her internal destruction. Little by little, he began to understand the void he was trying to fill with instant passions, with superficial compliments, with adventures that only increased his emotional hole. For the first time, he stopped blaming Leonard, his parents, his routine, and society. For the first time, he looked in the mirror and said, I did it. In parallel, Leonard met a woman named Claire at a lecture on emotional architecture and the impact of space on mental health. She was a professor of environmental psychology, with a kind look and a calm smile. They started talking during the break, then they had coffee together, then they exchanged emails. There was no rush, no tension. Just a calm connection, no secrets, no urgency. Leonard felt different. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel alert. There was no need to protect oneself, to be suspicious, to observe signs. Claire was transparent. And he was ready to allow himself, little by little, to believe again. Emily found out about Claire from a discreet post on social media, where Leonard appeared alongside her at an event. He felt something that wasn't jealousy. It was a loss. I knew that, at that moment, he was following, and that this time, he wouldn't come back. He took a deep breath, closed his cell phone, and continued writing. I was working on a text about choices. Not to publish. For herself. And as I wrote, I thought about the irony of fate. The woman who always sought freedom without consequences, now found her greatest lesson in consequences. Leonard, who had always sought order and predictability, now found in the unpredictable the possibility of a new beginning. But there was still one last thing to be done. Something Leonard needed to face before completely turning the page. And that moment was closer than he imagined. Months had passed since the last confrontation, and everything that previously seemed to revolve around the same orbit finally disintegrated into different destinations. Leonard was no longer a bitter man. The pain had been metabolized, the exposed wounds had turned into conscious scars. He didn't forget, but he also didn't relive it anymore. Mornings now had a different flavor. He woke up earlier than before, not to escape his thoughts, but to enjoy the silence. The new apartment was smaller, but there was light everywhere. The windows were big, and for the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to open them all without fear of letting the world in. Claire was increasingly present, but did not invade. It was the kind of presence that filled without pressing. The two maintained a silent and safe tune, something rare, built on the solid foundation of what was learned through pain. Leonard still needed to complete one last step. Not out of a need for revenge, but for justice. There was something pending with Helena. After much reflection, he decided to file a lawsuit for defamation and moral damages, using as a basis the messages and evidence he had carefully archived. I wasn't looking for money. He sought moral reparation. The process was discreet but efficient. Helena tried to defend herself with the same charm she used at dinners and social events, but in the face of justice, her smiles lost their strength. The judge, when analyzing the content of the conversations, understood that there was a pattern of emotional manipulation with the aim of destabilizing a relationship, which, although difficult to legally classify as a direct crime, was subject to civil sanctions. The sentence came: in addition to paying compensation, Helena was forced to issue a public retraction, which caused her silent expulsion from the circles she valued so much. Little by little, it lost space, invitations, relevance. He became a shadow of his former self, even though he pretended not to care. Emily followed everything from afar. I knew the process. She knew about Helena's separation, and it affected her on different levels. At first she was furious, as if Leonard was taking revenge for everything, but then, as she went deeper into the therapy sessions, she understood that he had acted with more restraint than she would have been capable of. His life was different now. Living in a modest apartment, without the perks he had before, he rebuilt his routine with humility. There were no more parties, no glamour, no social prestige. She worked on smaller events, for clients who agreed to hire her for her competence, not for influence. And this new version of her, even reduced to rubble, began to gain a consistency that the old one never had. For once, I didn't have to pretend. And that, although painful, was freeing. One afternoon, Emily ran into Leonard at a cultural fair. He was the one who noticed it first. She was simpler, her hair tied up, no makeup. He hesitated, but decided to approach. Claire was by his side, and when the three came face to face, time stopped for a moment. Emily smiled shyly, and Claire, in a gesture of admirable maturity, greeted her naturally. Leonard asked her how she was, and she answered truthfully, better. Emptier, but truer. Claire held Leonard's hand lightly, and Emily, upon noticing the gesture, smiled again. Not with irony, nor with bitterness, but with resignation. Exchanging one last look with Leonard, she said only, "Thank you for not destroying me, even when I deserved it." And then, he turned and went on his way. In the following months, Leonard published an article in an architecture magazine about how spaces reflect our ruins and emotional reconstructions. The text went viral, not only among professionals in the field, but among readers who found metaphors there about love, forgiveness, dignity. In an interview, he was asked if he was afraid of loving again, and he replied that love, when true, does not bring fear, but lucidity. Claire, upon hearing the answer, hugged him with a look that said more than 1,000 words. Emily, in turn, opened a small artisanal production studio. He left the corporate world of big events. He started organizing social actions, community events, art workshops. He rediscovered an old passion for painting, and used colors as a form of healing. In one of the murals he painted with children from an orphanage, he wrote a phrase that moved visitors: "To err is human. To recognize is courageous. To rebuild is sacred." Although he never said it, that sentence was a confession. As for Helena, she tried to get back on her feet in other cities, other networks. But something had changed. His name now carried a history. The power he held was illusory, and the fall was hard. People moved away, projects were closed, opportunities disappeared. She lost sponsorships, alliances, and even those who benefited from her schemes preferred to forget her. Isolated, she was left to live with her reflection in the mirror, perhaps her only faithful companion. And so, each piece of this story found its destiny. Leonard turned his pain into art, into ethics, into reconstruction. Emily turned her guilt into social work and self-knowledge. Claire showed that healthy love is silent and steady. Helena, finally, was confronted with the wreckage she caused and now lives among the ruins of her own vanity. This was a story about betrayal, yes, but most of all, about choices. About how the small decisions we make in the shadows define the contours of our ruins. About how the truth, however devastating it may be, has the power to free us from ourselves. And now I want to hear from you. What did you think of this story? Which character made you reflect the most? What attitude would you never forgive? Comment below, your opinion is very important. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow other stories like this, made to move, impact and make you think. And always remember, this channel does not support, under any circumstances, any type of betrayal. Here, we believe in truth, respect and the real consequences of choices. Until the next story.